wokeness, inclusiveness, diversity. What does it all actually mean?
No one seems to notice me. Isn't it a sin? What a crazy world we're living in. How's your father? Brown bread.
Afternoon, campers. A couple of little bits have happened this week that they've made me. I'm always thinking about how dangerous this woke society thing is, and how quickly we need to try and find our way out of it. But every now and again, something happens that, on the one hand, makes me chuckle, and on the other hand, makes me furious. So I saw a tweet earlier on this week, and in fact, give me a minute, I'll get it up on this screen here and I'll read it to you. This came from Tichana McGrath. Dog owners, stop saying goodbye, good boy and good girl to your pets. This kind of gendered language is normalising the myth of canine sexual dysmorphism and delegitimises the lived experience of trans dogs. What's really worrying about that is that I saw that, and my immediate thought was, this is somebody that actually expects to be taken seriously. So I did a little bit of digging and research, and you find out, in actual fact, that Tichana McGrath isn't a real person. She's a comedy parody that was created by he's a columnist for Spiked, I think, called Andrew Doyle. So it was actually just done for a bit of satire. But as of this month, Tichana, the fictitious character, has over 600,000 followers on Twitter. And I'm going to say, if you do Twitter, pop over and follow her, because some of the stuff is absolutely hilarious once you know that it's not real. What worries me is that there are people out there that actually have that kind of view. And I'm not one of them, I'm afraid, and I'm probably going to get vilified for this, I don't have... There are certain things that are dictated by science. So I'm not talking about people's sexuality. I'm talking about the perceived notion that there are 726 different genders. Sorry, that's absolutely not the case. I get the gay thing and the bi thing and the LGBT society, whatever it is. Look, I've been in professional entertainment all my life. I've been surrounded by gay people, so that's nothing new to me. I fully get that. If people are gay, if they are lesbian, if they are bisexual, understand that totally. What I don't buy is the extent to which the trans thing is expected to be normalised. I think it's dangerous on lots of different levels. First of all, because, yes, there are people... India Willoughby is a, in my opinion, now is a woman. She started life as a man, felt that she was in the wrong body, went down that path down the medical path, and is now a fully fledged woman. Get that completely. And I happily refer to her as she. On the other side of that, we have cretins like Eddie Izzard, who is clearly mentally ill. And he is a man and always has been a man. You can't seriously look at him and say he's a woman. But my reasoning for it is actually quite deep-rooted, because we have had situations where men have decided to identify as women in order to get moved out of a male prison into a women's prison, where they have then set about sexually assaulting vulnerable women. That's dangerous and it's wrong. We've had situations where men have identified as women so that they could enter elite sports events and win. Because whether you like this fact of life or you don't like this fact of life, the genealogy of the two genders, and there are only two genders, is that the male gender is stronger, generally speaking, than the female gender. So if a man goes and runs in a women's race, he is going to win it. If he goes into there's a guy you should look up. There's a guy called, forgive me if I've got this pronunciation wrong, but I think his name is Zuby. He's actually an independent rapper, commentator, very, very sensible, intelligent guy. And he actually, to make the point, entered a women's powerlifting event to make the point that it's not fair. It's not fair on women. I'm not a great modern feminist supporter, because I think a lot of what they put out there is actually not sense. It doesn't make any sense, and a lot of it is actually blatantly dishonest. But I do believe that women should have, where possible, an equal and fair platform. And when you've got men claiming to be women when they're not and allowed to partake, then no, that absolutely should not be even considered, because the facts do not support their claims. If, like India Willoughby, and I'm sure there are lots and lots of other examples that I just can't call to mind at the moment, they go through that medical process and fully transgend, is that the right word, from man to woman, then fair enough. I still would question whether or not they should be permitted to compete in women's sporting events. But until that point, until they are physically as close to being a woman as they can be, so in other words, they have no bits with which they can then assault women, then no, they're not women, and I will always flat refuse to call them women. They are men. Anyway, that sort of took me off of the point, although that was the point that I wanted to make about this, because we are in that situation now where a tweet like that could be taken seriously by lots of people. Oh my God, we're offending the dogs because some of them think they're women. Unfortunately, for that particular train of thought, dogs don't have the ability or disability of knowing how to manipulate situations for their own good. So the chances of there being transgender dogs is pretty remote, to be fair. But in the same week, I also see a post very quickly, very fleetingly on Facebook, I think, or it might even been Twitter, that says that a politician has said that there should be a 6 o'clock curfew on men. And I laughed, because unlike Titiana McGrath, who I thought was serious, this I thought was a joke. No politician would ever actually say that, because it's ludicrous. Not only is it vilely discriminatory, it's also nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. Then I discover, I'm sorry to keep looking at my screen, but Jennifer Helen Jones, she's actually Baroness Jones now. And she did, in fact, make a speech in the House of Lords saying that she's going to amend a future bill to include the possibility of making it mandatory that men have a 6 o'clock curfew in order to make it safer for women to walk about the streets. I do have a view on how you can make the streets safer for women. One of the things that we can do is to stop assuming that every single police officer is a law-abiding, upstanding, decent citizen, because they're not. Vast majority are, don't get me wrong, but there are rotten apples in every barrel. The other thing we can do is to start worrying about actually policing our streets more properly. So if Mr. Torag Khan, you ever get to see this, which I don't suppose you do because you're already so firmly stuck up your own arse, but should somebody relate this to you, if you was to worry a little bit less about the fixation that the minority has on pulling down statues, if you was to fixate a little bit less on spending, rephrase that, wasting billions of pounds on putting in cycle lanes, which actually do you no favours whatsoever, if you was to fixate a little bit less on turning London into a ethnic minority capital, and concentrate a little bit more on what you are actually supposed to do, which is running the capital city safely, then we might get somewhere. Put a little bit more effort into what you're supposed to be doing. You've done the same thing with Brexit. Kept poking your giant-size ooter into things that don't concern you. And in fact, they did pull you up about it and said, why are you worrying about Brexit? It's none of your business. It's got nothing to do with you. As London Mayor, you are not supposed to have an opinion on those things. You're supposed to be running London. And the state that London is shows us that clearly you're not. But I think this leads to a bigger issue. Google this Baroness Jones. She was on the London Assembly for, I think, about 13 years. And her main areas of interest were transport, housing, planning, and policing, with a strong emphasis on sustainability and localism. I think she spent some time on a Metropolitan Police Committee. But again, she's a Green Party politician who isn't exactly well endowed with a lot of common sense. So my biggest question is, should we be looking more closely at this twat? Or should we be wondering who put her in there in the first place? She's clearly not correct. There's something wrong with her. For her to think that this ridiculous policy could ever work, so men can't go out after 6 o'clock. So what about all the men who drive buses? What about all the men who drive trains? What about all the men who are emergency plumbers? What about doctors that are on call at night? And what time do we say that they can come back out again? Is it, 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning? It's ridiculous. It makes no sense whatsoever. I can remember Jim Davidson, who also has a great channel on here and on Ustream as well, by the way. I've got a soft spot for Jim. I know his brother Bill and his Bill and Billy. Bill and his wife Billy were friends of mine for quite a long while. We lost touch quite a few years ago now, but I still try and keep up with what they're doing. But Jim Davidson was slated. They absolutely tore him apart for, in fun. It was a joke. It's just what the man does. That's his job. He's a comedian. He's supposed to make people laugh and smile, and he's done it admirably well for a lot of years. Until the woke, politically correct mob decided that they didn't like his humour anymore and turned every comedian into a non-funny, boring arsehole. He made a joke about drunk drivers, and he said, I can solve that in one fell swoop. After 11 o'clock at night, you're only allowed to be on the road if you're drunk, because that way, if the drunks kill each other for drink driving, then that's their own fault. But if you're not allowed to be driving because you're sober, then you're going to be safe, and you're not. Ridiculous, granted, but it was a joke. And they absolutely lambasted him. This joker, Baroness Jones, the title's correct, actually, when you think about it, although it should be Baron of any sort of intelligent thought process. she's serious. That's not a joke. She is serious. No thought gone into. She's green, the Green Party. What do you expect? They don't think about anything. They just want to shut everything down, stop making cars, stop driving cars, put everybody on bikes, all become vegan. But yeah, so that's where we're at. We're at the point where things that appear to be ridiculous and you think are probably a joke are actually real. And it's all down to this ridiculous woke society that we're living in. And when you really analyse that, how did they come up with the name woke? Because they're clearly not awake. They're in a coma, most of them. So what do? How do we form a little club that gets hold of this woke thing, screws it up in a little ball and throws it in the garbage where it belongs? Because it's getting out of hand. I don't know why I'm laughing about it. It's actually quite dangerous. And I think if we're not very careful, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Anyway, I shall be back later on with another little rant. God bless you all. See you later on.